right, Germaine, we are so excited to have you with us today as we are wrapping up our season on advocacy. I know that Doug was like, there is no one that we could invite that would be better than you. So I'm so glad. Thank you for making the time. I'm excited to hear your story. I know that through conversations that you and Doug have had, he's just talked about how much of an advocate you've been your entire life. So I can't wait to hear. So Doug, introduce your friend and our guest today.
I remember when we called your daughter, I thought she was in trouble at school because the pastor was calling. So, but
yeah, when your name showed up on the dashboard,
like,
she was just like,
oh no,
not
him.
No, I remember first meeting you through Stefan and listening to you speak and touring the Urban League and listening to you talk. And I thought, God has given this woman the gift of influence, and she's using it for the kingdom in a beautiful way, in a place where a lot of people don't even know the work of the Urban League, at least in the world I live in. So it's like, this is a space where we need to hear that voice.
Absolutely.
And so I'd love to hear more about the work of the Urban League and some of your origin story.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, thank you so much for being here and allowing me to be into your space today. It's really a pleasure. The fact that Pastor Doug would actually want me to be here, you should be afraid.
I am a little afraid, but that's what we like it, I guess. A little bit of fear is good.
It's just like, oh, okay. But it is all good, and I just really thank God for this opportunity. So, as you recalled when you came to the Urban League and met with me and toured the Urban League and the work that we do, for many people, I think, who was in that space, that was the first time that they had even heard about the Urban League or even the work. We often say that the Urban League is the best kept secret in Broward, and the secret needs to be out, right?
Yeah.
So very high level, the Urban League of Broward County has been in this community for near 50 years. And the work that we do is primarily in urban pockets of Broward. And just for the audience to understand, the Urban League is affiliated with the National Urban League. So there are over 60 affiliates around the United States, actually 8 in the state of Florida. And in South Florida, you have 3, West Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade. So when you know the Urban League, you know it, right? And then when you're exposed to it, frankly, you can't get it out of your blood, is the way that I look at it. But when you think about your local urban leagues, it is a place where people come to have their lives transformed and changed from a economic and social perspective. So these are individuals who generally speaking, tend to be on the social and economic fringes, wanting to create a better life for themselves and their family. I often say at the Urban League, we're not interested in handouts, we're interested in giving you a hand up. And the 6 pillars that we work from are education, entrepreneurship, jobs, justice, housing, health. Wow. So 𝘾𝙬𝙍𝙬𝘍. That's the test at the end.
Easy to remember. All right.
And the premise or the theory of change is that, all of us have really all those aspects happening in our lives. We have a job, hopefully we have a home. Several of us are working for a business or creating a business, but it's all of those aspects coming together that creates the type of resiliency that is necessary. And we really focus on economic resiliency. Clearly you can have spiritual resiliency, social resiliency, but at the end of the day, if life is going to hit you, if you live long enough, life is going to come at you, and we want folks to be resilient, and specifically economic resiliency is important to us. So we do that through direct service. So we work in schools, in community, wherever folks are. And we have, as you toured, our community empowerment center that's right off of 27th Avenue and Sistrunk, next to the African American Research Library and Cultural Center. We built that about 11 years ago, and that has really become a hub for us. So we invite anyone that has a needs support in any of those areas to come and visit the Urban League, and then just get to know it. Because once you do, you're going to have somebody on your church pew that needs help, somebody in the grocery store, you could just let them know. Why don't you just ring the Urban League, and if we can't help, we're going to find a place to send you.
Wow.
Now, there are easier jobs.
That sounds like a lot, by the way. Let's just start there. That's a lot, yeah.
All right, so what makes you go, I want to go to school, I want to get my doctoral degree, I want to give all my time and energy in life to this very exhausting ministry. How do you become an advocate like that, where you're just like, I want to do this for my life?
It's interesting, and you talked about origin stories. So I grew up, I'm from St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, if the guests are trying to figure out this really weird accent. So growing up in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, and then transitioning here to high school. So I went to 4 different high schools. Do not do that to your child.
Yeah.
So started in St. Thomas, Tampa, then North Miami, and then South Miami. And that really gave me a perspective, really at that time of just really how different, geographies can be, number one. And then in high school, you always feel like you're the odd person out, but literally I was the odd person out, always walking into the cafeteria, not knowing anyone every year, just kind of imagine how that goes. But my foundational years in St. Thomas were pivotal to, I think, the way that I show up now, being in a community, being surrounded by individuals, whether it was school, church, community, that just told you could be whatever you want. You could do whatever you want. I often have a saying, like, I don't tell myself no. Like, literally, I don't. And if you tell me no, you need to have an exclamation mark on one end and hell on the front. Because if you don't have that whole phrase together, there is an opportunity for me to change your mind about whatever it is. I love that. Right? So that really came from the formative years of being in a place and space where people really said, yeah, you got to work hard. Right. You got to do, put yourself in the game, fully in the game. And if you do that, you're going to win more times than you lose, right? And I really come to the work from that perspective. But originally, I thought I wanted to be an architect. Okay. Went to University of Miami School of Architecture, got accepted, and I would sit in the rooms and was like, this is not for me. Like, I would just be chatting with the people. They're trying to draw, and I'm like, but what about? And what about? They're like, can we just get this angle right on this? But I only really wanted to be, at least I thought about that my junior year, and then of course applied and got into University of Miami, be an architect, because I had read a book called 𝘾𝘼𝙉𝙍 about my 11th grade year or so, and it gives the perspective of apartheid at that time from a 10-year-old Black South African perspective, living in shanty towns and so forth. And in my mind, I thought, wow, I could be an architect, move to South Africa, rebuild these shanty towns, and this will be great.
Wow.
So that was my thought process, not about the love of architecture. And that became really clear when everybody else were putting up their drawings. And I'm just like, ooh, those are pretty. And mine look like stick figures, right? So I would say to the audience that really, at the end of the day, for me, it has always been about, I realize now that it's always been about service. I don't think going through it, even in selecting the career that I did, leaving architecture behind, going to Florida State University, because UM was just too much if I was not going to be an architect. So I didn't think about it all from that perspective. But now that I look back and I think about the things that I did at Florida State University, starting an organization called Sisters that is now 30 years old, and I went back to Florida State the other day for a graduation, and all these young ladies are surrounding me because they're a part of this organization. You just think to yourself, you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, but the value of service and what it is to pay it forward and to know that really came from those formative years in the Virgin Islands, and then being able to just play that out, and thankfully in the work that I do now.
Wow.
So talk to me about your relationship with God. So as a Christian, Jesus said, I didn't come to be served, I came to serve. Like how much of that comes out of the upbringing and the kind of...
So before I knew myself, I was in the church, clearly. Okay. So I'm the last of 5 children, and my mom, thankfully, I've had both my parents in my life. My dad is now 92. My mom is 86. They both live in the Virgin Islands, thankfully healthy and well. But my mom was the one that really was the solid foundation of Christian walk. She served in church, in community, a great deal, and particularly the church community, from Sunday school classes to adult class to being, when lay ministers would come, they would stay at our home, things like that. She was the one, she's a prayer warrior, and she would be the one with the the small, well, what we call small groups now, they didn't call them small groups then. But on Saturday evenings, women would come to our home and they would just be in prayer. I know about all-night prayer meetings, not the ones that end at 12, but the ones that end at 4 a.m.
Yeah, the all night.
All night. You sleep on the bench all night. Prayer meetings. That's the way that I grew up, right? And that foundation to this day, and regardless, and I say to people, you know, we always say we're seeking, you know, where God is. Well, God doesn't really change. We move all over creation, and He is centered. Yeah. And so regardless of where I have gone, Jesus Christ has always been center for me. And I'm just thankful for my mom that made sure that that was, you know, important to her, and she also made it important to me. And as a result of seeing just the way that she served, she brought me along with her because, again, I'm the last of 5. The sibling before me is 12 years older than I am. So everywhere she went,
there you
I
were.
went.
So you were the exclamation point.
Absolutely. Yes, all day. And, you know, so, and then she also didn't allow, and I try to do this with my daughter now. My daughter is 16 years old. She's a student here at Calvary, so really proud of her and thankful for that ministry that you all have. I try to do the same with her, to let her serve with me. Yeah. So when we're planning Vacation Bible School, for example, it's not like, oh, you're going to be the recipient of Vacation Bible School. I need you to review the curriculum. Is this going to make sense? You're in high school now. Does this make sense for a middle schooler? Does it make sense for elementary?
Right.
That's what my mom did for me. You know, when she would be in her Sunday school class, I would have the opportunity to review the Sunday school lesson. I used to, I don't know if you remember when you would put to make copies, you put carbon in between paper.
Yeah, she doesn't remember that, but I do.
I don't know.
No, okay, well,
It's
we're
okay.
going to have a moment here, Pastor Doug. You remember
Dial-up,
that?
internet, the whole thing, beavers, the whole thing.
All that, yes.
She has no idea. It's like black and white TV.
That kind of stuff.
Teach me.
So she would allow me. I was like, Mom, you know, we should do a little worksheet on this. And she would get me these little carbon papers, and I used to write. So if you put it in between sheets, whatever you copy on the first will actually be printed through the rest, right? If you press hard enough. So she would let me do that, right? She didn't have to, but she did, right? Even simple things like taking attendance in the class, or when they would have Sunday school teacher meetings, she couldn't leave me home alone, or at least didn't want to. So I would be in those meetings, you know, with the real teachers and the like. So I try to do that with my daughter now too, so that she understands that service isn't something that you do when you get quote unquote grown.
Yeah.
This is something that you do now, and you have a responsibility to do it now. So I would say for me that is definitely my relationship with Christ, and being able, my mom sharing that with me, and then me doing it also with my children. My son more chooses to be much more behind the scenes. He's more of a tech guy and the like. But again, finding ways for them to serve alongside, and that for me has been important. And I guess the last thing I'll share on it is that I really don't separate my life. You know, I'm very unapologetic about I am a Christian. That's who I am. That's how I show up. I show up like that in the workplace. I show up like that in church. Wherever it is, that's who I am. And everybody knows that. And thankfully, I work in a place and space where that is accepted. And I've never, very few times, I should say, I have been challenged related to that. And I've just always really stood my ground, and really had wind beneath my wings to be able to stand that ground and be like, this is who I am. And if this doesn't work for you, then I don't work for you. And that's okay. You know, and I'm fine with that. So I've been able to really bring all aspects of my life into one space, that type of service that Jesus Christ was able to demonstrate for us. I'm able to demonstrate it in all my life, all parts of my life. And I encourage my staff to do the same, and clearly my family.
Yeah, so I want you to help us build a bridge. So a lot of people who are listening or watching right now could resonate with, hey, I grew up in a home where my parents taught me to serve, and it's not about me, and to represent my faith at work and at church, wherever I am. But in many ways, many Christians are completely unaware of the people living around them, or even some of the brokenness that happens in a place like South Africa that is sort of like, oh, I saw that on the news. Okay, back to my job. So How have you built the bridge between this Christian world, people who love God, want to do what's right, but just complete unaware or unconcerned about people either on the other side of their zip code or on the other side of the world that don't have all of those privileges that we have? How do you build that bridge? How have you built that bridge?
Right. I think one of the things that at least I try to do with the platforms that I've been given is to really create a very practical way of helping people sometimes like to understand data and to make it real. Okay. So I'll give a quick example. I was trying to explain to a group of parents why the current situation that we find ourselves in a post-COVID environment with the number of particularly Black and brown students being so far behind in reading and math should make all of us a little weary and scared. And I could see I wasn't getting through because it was everybody else's children. Because my child is in AP classes, right? Or my child is in honors classes. They're not reading below grade level. So their children happened to be with them. So I asked 10 of them to come up. And it was basically, I was trying to demonstrate that 40% of our children are reading at grade level, and actually a little less than that, and 60% aren't. Wow. So rather than just using the number, I had 10 kids to come up. And then I put X's, like, air X's on 6 of them. And said, all of these kids no longer matter. And of course, the parents whose kids no longer matter, they're like, what do you mean? They no longer matter, kid. Right? That's my kid. And then to your point, Kelly, then making that point, that same feeling that you just had when I put that X on your child is the feeling that these children and their parents have because they are not X'd out. They're X'd out of the opportunities that we take for granted. When you're not reading, and these are 9th and to 12th grade students, when these students are not in the high school level reading at grade level, what are the chances of jobs? What are the chances of let's forget jobs, post high school, like just graduating, right? And then we get to what is their employment opportunities going to be and the like. So it was like that click moment. So I'm always trying to get to the click moment, right? Where you're able to get it to a place where at least I can understand it, even if I can't accept because it may not be me, but I visually can get it. So I try to do that. No different than another example in voting. I would have people tell me all the time, I don't vote for judges because I just don't understand it. And at first I was like, how do I get folks to understand that this is important? Yeah. So, and they make it plain to me, I vote for everything else, but not judges because I don't understand. I said, okay, do you have a son, a daughter, anybody? And they would say, yes, of course, And I said, you love them? And they're like, of course. I said, let me tell you when you're going to care about a judge and what it is that they think and how they present themselves. God forbid something happened where your son or daughter needed to be in front of a judge. And that judge had the authority now to be able to decide whether your son or daughter not only went to jail, but whether or not they had the death penalty, or whether or not how long that jail time might be, or whether or not they could get like diversion, the idea of, okay, you did this, but I'm going to give you another chance. They get a chance to do that. We do that work at the Urban League. Would you not care about the thought process, the origin story of that judge, the way in which they're like, I get the character of that judge. It's like, I would. I said, that's why. That's why you need to pay attention to the conversations that they're having, because whatever it is and whoever it is that they present themselves to be, let's just assume, that's how they're going to rule in these situations. There is the rule of law, and then there are the experiences that they have. And you want to be clear about that. So, I always try to do that and get people to really understand how it's practical. So I would say definitely for trying to bridge both worlds together is to, for us that definitely see it, is to get out of our own heads because we get it and get into the other person's head and be like, and not judge. Like, why don't you get it? Because the moment we get into that space, we stop getting creative around how to get the other person to get it and to understand and at least to care just a little bit about whatever the issue is. And I think that's where you talk about the influence, right? I think sometimes when we have titles and platforms and so forth, we've gotten to these titles and platforms however we got to them, and we sometimes forget that people aren't studying this every day.
Right.
People aren't paying
This is
attention.
not their everyday
This is not their everyday
world, or-
world. They're trying to pay a light bill.
Right.
They're trying to get to work. They're trying to figure out how many buses I need to take to get to A, B, or C,
Yeah.
or how am I going to make more money to be able to keep these 80 employees, employed? Whatever their thing is, they may not be thinking about that particular issue that you feel so passionate about. So we have to really get out of our own heads. And to your point, take these walls that we want to build up and lay them flat. And when you lay a wall flat, that becomes a bridge, right? And if we really begin to focus on that, I think we'll make a big difference.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I feel like, we're in a world now where people they'll argue about a word, like what is justice? Okay, so everyone's got their own version of justice, and we know, what God's heart is, but people have a 3-hour argument over what's justice and what's right or wrong, but getting people to go, can we just listen to each other, learn from each other, be curious enough to go, I never thought about it that way, and then maybe take a step. So
but that's the word, to be curious enough. To be curious enough that I want to respect the fact that, because I have conversations with people all the time that I don't agree with. Right? I advocate for things that people may, on the surface, be like, oh, that's a good idea, but I just don't want it in my neighborhood. Those kinds of things. So, I feel sometimes
that doesn't
like
happen
a
in
bummer.
church, but
Oh, never, never, ever. Not here.
Not here.
But you feel a little bit like a bobblehead, just like, okay, where are you going with it? But I pray all the time for discernment. But to your point around curiosity, I think to be curious enough, not to stay at the headline, because I think we spend so much time at the headlines, right? That we need to dig deeper. Like, what does that really mean? Like, what is it? Like when we talk about housing and housing affordability, right? Folks are like, yes, that's good. We need that. People need affordable places to live. But I just don't want that in my backyard. Like what in your backyard?
Right.
A house? That it just happens, the person can actually afford to pay the rent or the mortgage. So to make it so that people understand who you're saying no to. And that's where, going back to the being curious, like when people are not curious, I think we have to just kind of interject. Well, let me give you some more information.
Yeah.
When you say, I don't want that, let me tell you who you don't want. You don't want the dental assistant. You don't want the cafeteria worker. You don't want the person who bags your groceries at Publix, or that's who you don't want. The person who is at the child care center,
right, the teacher assistant who's helping your son right now.
Exactly.
Right now,
That's who you don't want.
Yeah.
And then when you begin to make it practical for folks, at least it begins to take a few bricks down.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of listening occurs. And I've actually found sometimes that it brings people, takes the wall down, make a bridge,
Brings a bridge.
and then we're able to get to at least some deeper, meaningful conversations.
I love that. A wall falls down and makes a bridge. Yeah, we need a lot more of that.
That's a whole sermon, right?
That's a
there.
whole
Yeah,
sermon.
that
Yeah,
is.
you might. I'm gonna give you my sermon.
You can pay her after this for that
That's
idea.
right.
Yeah.
I was thinking. That's what I'll say.
There you go. Yeah, full permission.
From what it sounds like, I mean, you have enough going on at the Urban League by serving so many different people and so
Yeah.
many different populations. But it also sounds like a huge part of just whether it's your role or just who you are is educating people on what's happening right in front of them and how
Yeah.
they can not only just like have more compassion, but maybe be part of a solution. So is there a part of the Urban League where you do bring people into that space and help them to serve and get in the community? What does that look like?
Yeah, we're doing a better job of that,
Okay.
actually. So we do have, a whole volunteer network for the Urban League. We have a young professionals network for those between the ages of 21 to 40 to get involved and engage so that they can figure out what they're passionate about. And I think that's the part, Kelly, to your point, is like bringing people in to figure out what they're passionate about. So when we even think about the church, and folks have various, we read our Bible, we have the base of this is what I am called to do, to go outside of myself, to serve, to bring people to know Christ, to make him known and live that life. And then there are the things that come in between that you get passionate about. And I often say to folks that once you find that thing or things that feels that disrupts your very soul, you can never go back, right? You can never go back to business as usual because you realize that if I don't say something about this, if I don't do something about this, that's going to be a challenge. So we're doing better at bringing people into conversations. But the piece that I'm really most interested in and trying to really sharpen the pencil on is to get the individuals who are most impacted by all that is happening to have their own voice.
Yeah.
You know, to know how to feel that they are empowered enough to advocate for themselves, that their voice is important. And I think that, and we have it in every pew, every aisle of the church, right? Broken people come, you know? And so there's one thing when you have it all together and yay, you know, I have the time, the talent, the treasure to advocate, right? To be there. That's one group of folks. And Lord, we need them. The power is when people get sick and tired of being sick and tired and their voice becomes louder. And I think that is where we need to activate more. We need to activate people telling their own stories, you know, being able to help others understand why this is important, you know, while those who may have what I call T-cube, time, talent, treasure, to be able to do it, yes, that's a space. But how do we take our energy and get the voices out, you know, to be able to speak? So I'm hoping that we get better at that because that's important.
So can you give me an example of a person that you were able to teach how to use their voice? Like you've worked with lots of people. I know this is a passion of yours, and you're so intuitively good at it. So give me an example. Like how do you help someone who's just, my voice doesn't matter. I don't know how to use it.
So this was like really, really early in my career, the one that comes to my mind. So I was, when I started at the Urban League, I was working a program at 2 elementary schools. One, and it was an all-girls program. Before math and science was all a girls thing, I actually ran the first program at the Urban League that focused on math and science for girls. And I had this young lady in my program that I just knew was struggling. You know, I knew that there was something, I'm not an educator, I'm a social worker, but I knew that there was a disconnect for her between what was happening in the classroom and her ability to perform, and then it was playing itself out socially. So I was talking to the mom, and I said, you know, I know you got a lot going on, so forth and the like. How can I help you? So that's the first piece, right? It's not, what can I do for you, but how can I help you, right? I want to be an arm for you. I just don't know what to do. I'm done. She's just too much. I said, okay. Note to self, mom frustrated, check. Mom is giving up, check. Got to get in here. So I went the back route. So I started talking to the guidance counselors, and I said, hey, you know, such and such seems to be having, she's a lost case. I just can't. I was like, oh, Lord, this is going to get a little bit more tough, right? Related to it. So I began to then really began to just meet the mom where she was. So why was she so frustrated? If I recall correctly, she might have been working a few jobs at that time. So the idea of me calling her and saying, hey, can you meet me at the school? That was like just one more thing. So I worked out with the mom that she would give me, there were certain like affidavit papers that she could sign that would allow me to advocate on behalf of her child, like to be able to get information and so forth. So a consent to release form is basically what it was. So I said, if you sign this document, I can then go into the school and I can get her records, get her information, so forth and the like. And then I can meet you at whatever time that works for you, and I can go over it with you, and then we could talk about a plan of action. So sometimes it is about just one, meeting a person where they are, rather than being like, okay, well, everybody's giving up, I should give up too, to meeting them, you know, meeting them where they are. In the meantime, I'm still working with the daughter, trying to keep her on the straight and narrow, encouraging her and the like. But as I began working with the mom, the walls The bricks started coming down a little bit, and then the wall laid flat, and there was a bridge. Long story short, Mom said, "I'll make the time to come." We got in there. Mom was on it because we had done a little coaching session before. I said, "This is what they'll ask. This is what you say," so forth and the like. So we did, like a little mock interview, and she was ready to go. Fast forward, I was in the hair salon. This was years ago, and this young lady is looking at me, and I'm looking at her, and I'm like, do you remember me? And I was like, no, I don't. You like have that moment, like, did I fire you? Did something go wrong?
Is this good or bad?
Is this good or bad, right? And she's like, aren't you Miss Smith? And so now I knew that was a flash back in time.
Yeah.
Because that's my maiden name. And I said, yeah, I'm Germaine Smith-Baugh. And she says, well, you won't remember me probably, but you ran a program at Martin Luther King Elementary School. I said, of course I remember this. And then she said her name, and it was like click.
Wow.
Right? So she went to Florida A&M University, graduated with her nursing degree. At that time, she had a daughter. I don't know what she's doing now, but she survived. She not only survived, she thrived.
She thrived,
right? And I think it was about her, clearly, and, we talked a little bit at that time, but for her to get past the things that she did, to get past high school, get to university, complete a nursing degree, and then whatever else has transpired in her life, that gave her a new voice, right? And I think as individuals who desire to be advocates, right, is to be really careful about the way in which we impose who we are and how we want to show up on the individuals that we're advocating for or on behalf of.
That's really good.
Like to be able to really say, okay, let's put this judgment off to the side and let me have this. I mean, I've dealt and had to handle individuals, and I say this all the time in full respect, that I think even the mother or father that is right now strung out on whatever they're strung out on, if you get them in one moment, and they have children, if you get them in one moment of clarity, they want the best for their children.
Yeah.
They really do. So whatever it is that you're presenting to me right now, I got to put that all off to the side, because I've had it. I'll be like, Lord, this parent is so high right now, but you know what? I'm going to put that off to the side, and we're going to try to get to this one moment of clarity so I can get this paper signed, so I can do what is necessary on behalf. And it's so easy to just get into that judgy mode that we have to be super careful.
I love thinking too about, the encouragement to stay curious. And I think you just display a curiosity even about what options are there for people who have been told no a million times, and like what that curiosity opens. It's opened a future for that girl that everyone was telling her she wouldn't have. Yeah. And it's because you decided that there had to be something else that could be done. Right. So even thinking of people who are facing addiction and maybe even incarceration repeated over and over, it's like, but there's still another option for them. Right. Maybe they just haven't been given it yet, or maybe it hasn't been created. Right. So I just am encouraged to hear you say those things, because I think we are quick to just say, oh, you've exhausted every option, then obviously I can't help.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. But so I want you to think like future, because God's given you this heart of service, this heart of advocacy. It's like a long obedience in the same direction. You're making an impact in this community. And what's your dream? Like if I could fast forward 20 years, like I would love to see the Urban League. I'd love to see South Florida. I'd love to see the church. What would you love to see when you dream your dream? What does that look like?
Wow, dream big. Okay, so I would say, what I would really love to see in church, community, business, the trifecta of all that is out there. And it's not to try to just keep the drumbeat of curiosity, but a part of it is that. Like, I would love for us to choose to get out of our comfort zones and be able to really have conversations, even when those conversations might put us at different, quote unquote, ends of the spectrum, right? But to create places, and I know we use the term safe places these days, but places where we can really have my best opportunities for growth are people who disagree with me.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Say that again.
Yeah, my best opportunities for growth, it's true, where people disagree
Yeah.
with me.
That's good, yeah.
Because what it made me do was get more curious.
Yeah, yeah.
Be like, well, why do they think that?
Yeah.
Right? And even when thinking about things like we have an entrepreneurship center. We're the only headquartered community development financial institution in Broward County, which means that the U.S. Department of Treasury has endorsed one of our entities, it's a subsidiary of the Urban League, to be able to lend to minority-owned businesses. I had wanted to do that for years, and everybody told me no. But remember what I told you before.
Yeah, no.
Right? Everybody told me no, not possible, et cetera. I was like, okay, I hear you. But in 2020, we got the designation after 5 years of working on it. After 3 rejection two rejection applications, the third one went through. Now we sit on resources that we're able to deploy to businesses to help them to grow, right? And when I think about all the no's and the people who, when I was advocating, of course you should be supportive of this, and they're like, no, we're not going to support it, it made me go back and sharpen the Urban League's pencil a little bit more. So you said that our infrastructure isn't ready yet. No problem. So when we hire this role, we're going to look at this infrastructure part. We'll be back. You said that we don't have enough operating capital for that. Okay. All right. So where do we go ahead and get that? But if I had not been curious enough to listen to the reasons behind the no, even though that's not what I wanted to hear, right? And even though some of those no's came with some extra that was unnecessary. If I could get past myself, and I think for me is that if I was to dream big, is for us to get past ourselves, to sit in rooms where we are uncomfortable. I tell you, there was one conversation that I had in Tallahassee that I thought that somebody would have had to get me out of jail that day because the way the person was coming at me was just totally disrespectful. But I said to myself, I was the only woman sitting at the table in a room full of 15 people, and the person was just unrelenting. And I really, I pray all the time, but Lord, that was like, why am I here? Why are you subjecting me to this embarrassment, this, all of this? And what Ring said, you're not here for you. You're here for everybody that will never be in this room.
Wow.
That's good.
And when I sat in that for a moment as a person is just like literally barking at me as though I'm a 10-year-old child, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm not going to lose it. I'm not going to go to jail today. I'm not going to go across this table and slap them because that's what I want to do, right? I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it all because these small businesses, these minority-owned businesses, these Black, brown, and women-owned businesses need me to stay in this space and bring this back home. So I look now, and we're, sitting on a loan fund and so forth, and that person is no longer there, I'll just say, while we are growing and moving. So if I had to dream big for the church, for the businesses, for community, is how do we really come together around the things that sometimes we think are so different but not so much, and listen, and being able to share our true thoughts and the way that we want to go. And I call them basement conversations, where, and the reason I call them basement conversations is because we're going to come out of the room, you're going to know my position and I'm going to know yours. And you're going to understand that when I get up in front of this mic, this is what I'm going to say because of the constituency that sits behind me. And then I know that you're going to get up and say what you're going to say because of the constituency that sits behind me.
Right.
But we're going to go back into the basement and be like, okay, you did your part really well. And you're going to tell me you did your part really well. Because this is chess, it's not checkers, right? We have an end game for a stronger community. And that stronger community requires diverse voices to be in that space. And that's what I would wish for, that we would be able to do that with greater clarity, with much more intentionality, and to get to that stronger community. We're good. Because I definitely have other colleagues across the nation are like, wow, Broward is definitely a different place. But I also know we could be better.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, I just want to say how much I appreciate your voice.
Yeah.
And your tone. You know, we're in an age where tone and posture matter.
Yeah.
And where the ability to take an insult and not return evil for evil. Well, you know, that's one of those Christ-like, you know, attributes like Holy Spirit help
See,
me.
I had to really get there that
Help
day.
me. Yeah, no, listen, there are days. But to be able to do that, you know, gives your voice more power.
I think so.
Because at the end of the day, people look at that and say, there's something about Germaine that's different.
Yeah.
She knows who she is. She knows what she believes. And I think, to me, that's what creates curiosity. It's easy to insult for insult. It's easy to, you know, the tweet, the post, the talking point to make
headlines.
everyone, you got her. And that just dumbs us all down. It doesn't lead to real conversations.
And to your point, Pastor Doug, people look at the board of the Urban League and they're like, how in the world do you have, because all they see is the outside.
Right.
How do you have the most conservative X to the most liberal Y to everything in between, all sitting at this same table? I said, if you only knew their story, if you knew their story, then you would really understand why this mission is important to them, why they see the value proposition of an urban league being in this ecosystem, and understanding that the idea of the diversity that created the Urban League. It was a diverse group of individuals, both on race, ethnicity, religion, gender, and thought leadership that brought the Urban League to Broward County near 50 years ago. And if you understand the origin of it, then you will also understand why that same thought leadership diversity is important even more at the table now. Because it's through that we get doors open to us in ways that if I just stuck in one position, be like, nope, never have that door open.
Right.
And it doesn't challenge me as a leader to think, okay, because I'll call people be like, well, why would a person do that? And then because we have trust, they'll come back and be like, well, look at it from this point of view. It's like, oh, don't agree, but I can see that, you know? Or, yeah, I can agree with that part, you know, in terms of that. But then also because you have the platform to then talk to other people about it, you can then kind of lift up those voices. So I think that becomes, you know, really important for who we are as an organization, but more importantly, who I am as a leader. And that tone and that posture of, I don't always have to be right. I don't always have to have the accolades, et cetera. Once we get past all of that and we just get super focused, at the end of the day, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Every single one of us, we're going to be fine. I'm thinking about the folks who are under the bridge, who literally and proverbially under the bridge. What do we do for them? Right. What do we do for them in order to make sure that they have a fair shot and their children have a fair shot, you know, at what's next?
Okay, so last question.
Okay.
Throughout this season, we've really been trying to encourage the listener to just do something. You know, everybody can be an advocate for someone or something. So particularly like today in our culture, I would say young people are quick to either jump on a wagon or jump off a wagon.
Very quickly.
Very quickly.
Advocate for a week.
Yeah, because of an Instagram post or because of a TikTok or because of whatever it may be. But you've been an advocate for many years, like Doug said, in the same direction, committed to the same cause and the same place and the same people. Can you just speak to like how do you cultivate that grit early on to keep that commitment to those people? Because the fruit of that commitment to those people in the long term is so much greater than just being whipped around by every cause or every, you know, cancellation or whatever.
Yeah.
So how do you cultivate that in your younger years, even amidst a culture that would say, no, be a canceller, you know, but instead be a believer that there's, you know, something for everyone. So what does that look like?
I think that word grit is really, really good. I think what I'm finding, so I'll answer two ways.
Yeah.
What I'm finding, even for me, if I'm just being very plain spoken and honest, is these times are feeling a bit like whiplash, right? It does. And I'm figuring out ways to center myself in this new reality that we're in. So I'm having my own, a different kind of struggle with the grit, right? But for those who are newer to the work, I would say that one, a part of advocacy is really understanding that you're not doing it for you.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to advocate for something when it's impacting you personally. Like I have a strong voice, that's not right, that kind of a thing, because it's impacting me,
Right.
You told me this is $1.05. It said $1 over there. You're up there at the cash register over 5 cents. That kind of a thing. Easy when it's impacting you. I think the advocacy grit comes when you understand that, and it was in a public speech of, I believe he was a German pastor, that talks about when they came for the socialists, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a socialist and so forth and the like. I think when you understand that when you advocate, you're advocating beyond yourself, not for yourself, that's where the grit comes in. Because if it's only about you, then you can jump from one thing to another, because it's like, I have one issue today, I have another issue tomorrow. But when you understand that if I don't speak up for this group of people or on this issue or whatever, because I feel very passionate about it, because it has nothing to do with me, that's where it really comes in. Like the days when I'm dealing with like housing and housing affordability and the whole NIMBY thing, and I'm like, but I own my house. Like, why am I doing this? Like I don't need to do this. But why?
Right.
Before I owned a home, I was in an apartment, right? I was paying rent, so forth. So I want to advocate, not because for me, but for the young professional who today, I don't even know how folks survive, that now has to have 3 and 4 roommates, but that's not what we told you all. Right. We told you that if you went to college and you did well, you will be able to get a job, and then you will be able to make a life and have a dream, not be back with roommates 4 or 5 people deep, or live with your parents. Like that is not on the to-do list.
They're coming back, Germaine. They're coming back.
Kind of a thing. That's not what we told you, but that is now your reality.
Right.
So I would say that particularly for our newer to the advocacy space, the young person, young professional, that grit that you're talking about really comes in when you understand that where you sit, there I go, but for the grace of God.
Right.
And if you could keep that in your mind, then when anyone is being dishonored, even if I don't agree with all of whatever, if you're being dishonored, then after they dishonor you, they're coming for this group. And after they dishonor that group, then they're coming for this group, right? Yeah. And if you're not careful, there'll be nobody there.
It's like the middle school bully. Someone's got to stand up.
Somebody got to stand up. Even if and it's going to cost you something. It will always cost you something. If you're advocating or you feel that you're in advocacy and it doesn't cost you anything, you got to ask yourself, what are you advocating for then?
Right.
If it doesn't cost you a little bit of reputation, if it doesn't cost you a little bit of sleep, whatever it might be, a little bit of money, whatever it is, if it's not costing you anything, then you're just talking, right? You got to get to a place and space where, come whatever, this is my true north, and this is what it is that I believe in and what's important. So that's what I would share.
Wow. I mean, you make it sound so like wrapped up in a bow. It's just amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you,
it's
Germaine.
so not, right?
I know. No, it's not. It's messy, but you prove by your life, your work, it's worth it, obviously. And we know it is. Absolutely. So we're really grateful for you, for the work that you're doing here in our community. And we're hopeful for how this conversation inspires other people to stay curious and to advocate for other people beyond themselves. And we can't wait to hear those stories. So again, thank you,
Don't
Germaine.
forget your grit.
That's right. Don't
Gotta
forget
get
your
grit.
That's right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
you so
Germaine.
much. I appreciate it.
Wow, that was such an incredible conversation. Germaine is so inspiring because she's doing a great work, but she makes it so practical for everybody. So I hope that everybody hears that today. I think my biggest takeaway was just the repeated theme of staying curious about the people that you're having conversations with, the people that you're serving, people that are different than you, what power that has to break down those walls and to build a bridge. I am deeply challenged by that. What about you, Doug?
Yeah, I love just her grit. Like, it's like, don't tell me no.
I love that.
And her ability to take an insult because she's it's not about her. It's about the people she represents. And that's what a good advocate does. You can insult me. I think of Jesus, You slap me on one cheek, slap me on the other cheek. It's not about me. It's about I'm here to help.
Yeah.
And that posture of humility, but there's a tenacity. It's like a tenacious conviction. And just her way. I think all of our advocates have this powerful, hopeful optimism that God has called them. They're there for a reason, and they're going to keep on sticking with it because they trust that God's going to work in it. And I love all that about all of our advocates.
Yeah.
And so Germaine's one of the best. She's
such a great person to kind of close out this season. And I think, we got to talk to her a little bit after, and I just want to close with this thought that, she said, like, advocacy doesn't just look like big signs, a lot of yelling saying, don't do this or do that. She's like, I don't even like doing that. That's not the advocacy I do. Advocacy looks different. And I think we've been able to display that this season. And so I'm hopeful that people will walk away saying, what matters to God is bigger than what matters to me. And I need to take a step outside of myself to start advocating on behalf of the other people that God has put in front of me. So
yeah, and even if it costs you something, it's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it. Wow, what a great season, Doug. Anything you heard today about the Urban League, we're going to link in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. You may have an Urban League in your area, even if you're not here in South Florida or in Broward County. So thanks again, you guys, for joining us. If you haven't listened to the other advocacy episodes, this is a great opportunity for you to go back and listen to our other incredible guests. And we will see you next season.
See you next season.
Thank you for listening to the Seasons podcast. Our hosts are Pastor Doug Souter and 𝘾𝙯𝙍𝙍. Seasons is produced by Calvary Chapel Fort Lauderdale, and our theme song is Seasons by Connor Henderson with Calvary Music. For more information about our church or this podcast, visit 𝘾𝑼𝙉𝙍𝙍𝙍𝑒𝐿.org.